right now.
Today I've got the pleasure and the honor to interview Professor Patricia Mokhtarian. Patricia is a professor of environmental and civil engineering at Georgia Institute of Technology, at Georgia Tech, and she's an expert on travel behavior. She's devoted her career to study how people make trips, how different things in society changes affect how we people make those trips over time. Patricia started her career in California, then as many others, she moved to the south, and she decided to go to Georgia, where she's actively working right now. For those of you that doesn't know me, my name is Ricardo Sánchez, and I am the global head of technical services and innovation at Cintra, and I'll be conducting the interview today. Welcome, Patricia. And I don't know if you want to feel free to add anything else to my brief introduction.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be invited, especially it sounds like the first one of this series. So thank you. And as you say, I have been studying travel behavior for a long time. I got my PhD in 1981 at Northwestern University in the Chicago area. And travel behavior was the subject of my dissertation and has been my passion ever since. So a lot has happened since then.
Thank you, Patricia. What I want to start with today is with an area that I know you've been researching for a while, probably longer than anyone else, and that is the area of teleworking, telecommuting, work from home, that as of today is quite a hot topic, with the impact in society of the COVID-19. So I just wanted to, as I said, start with that. So, well, when did you started researching this area?
Yes, it was 1982, actually. As I mentioned, I had just finished my PhD in 1981. I took a postdoc in California. And after that, I took a position as a transportation planner at the Southern California Association of Governments, which is the regional planning agency for the Los Angeles area. So I was hired as a young transportation planner, and a non-trivial part of my job was to look at this new idea called telecommuting to see could it be a strategy for improving congestion and air quality in the Los Angeles region. So I've been studying it ever since, both at SCAG and in my academic career, even more so.
How has it changed then? I mean, how has it changed since the early days all the way, let's say, to the beginning of the COVID pandemic?
Well, in some ways, as the French like to say, the more things change, the more they stay the same. So the problems with teleworking adoption, problems might be too strong a term, but barriers to its increased adoption, I think are still much the same as they have been for decades. Management resistance, employees think they want it, but don't always find out that it's as great as they thought it would be. On the other hand, certainly teleworking has grown gradually over the years, so it has taken its place, but the growth has been sort of under the radar, if you will. And so technology has absolutely improved so that more things are possible to do from home or remotely now than was the case in 1982, for sure. But technology has also never really been the major barrier to adoption. I think it's always been people factors. Another thing we've seen over the years is extreme events, one after another, from the 1984 Olympics, 2 years after I took my job at SCAG, was an extreme event during which we were promoting teleworking as a way of helping to reduce the inevitable traffic congestion that was going to result. Practically every Olympics since then, to my knowledge, has promoted teleworking. And then you've had blizzards and hurricanes and earthquakes and other infrastructure failures. And even the 2003 SARS pandemic during all of these extreme events, teleworking has been promoted as a strategy when it was unsafe to travel or impossible to travel on the normal commuting routes. And after every extreme event had passed, things seemed to go back to normal. And so the one question is, will COVID-19 be any different?
How do you see the future impact in mobility? For example, do you see any, how it's affecting mileage? How it's affecting, do you see any substitution effect? So if people is, for example, not commuting, but are they making other trips instead? I don't know, I wanted to hear from you about that.
Right. In the early days of studying teleworking, we transportation planners and scholars were concerned about, well, what about the rebound effect, right? So in principle, workers are saving commute trips, and we've documented that. I have no doubt that the net impact of teleworking for the employees doing it on the days that they do it, for as long as they do it, is to reduce travel. They're not, more than counteracting their commute trip with additional travel. So we looked at things like non-work travel. Are they making more, local trips? And what about residential relocation? Are they moving, far away because they only come in 1 day a week instead of 5 days a week, and so forth? We did not find substantial evidence of either of those rebound effects that we were worried about. Non-work trips, there may have been, some studies found no significant difference. Some found a small increase in non-work travel, but negligible. And what we concluded was, hey, if you're actually really working all day, then you're not going to be running around making a bunch of extra trips that you wouldn't have made otherwise. And when you do make a trip, because let's face it, your time is probably more flexible, and that's one of the attractions of teleworking. So you may make trips that you would have made otherwise, perhaps on a different day of the week, but they're also going to tend to be local trips. Maybe you're going to walk instead of take your car or bicycle, or at least not be on the freeway and, engaging in congestion, contributing to congestion. So we didn't find non-work travel increases to be noticeable at all. And with respect to residential relocation, that's a point we can come back to with COVID if you want. We have not seen much evidence of, people moving farther from work because of teleworking. We found ample evidence that they had already moved farther from work for other reasons. There's the background trends of decentralization in the US and other developed countries that was happening before telecommuting became a thing for all kinds of other reasons: cheaper housing, larger lots, lower densities, nice place to raise kids, whatever. And so all of that still continued now with teleworking, enabling people to have a longer commute on fewer days a week and, making that lifestyle more manageable. So contributing to it, if you will, but not causing it directly.
Let's now move to other COVID-related mobility impacts. And in particular, I would like to talk now about the other, I think it's big, COVID-19 mobility impact, which is the rise of e-commerce, online shopping, contactless delivery or curbside pickup. So how do you think this is affecting mobility? How all the studies, they predicted that with the rise of e-commerce, there will be significantly less shopping trips, and so there will be less congestion, which it hasn't been the case. So how do you think these the new shopping trends are going to be affecting mobility in the future?
Yeah, it's another complex picture. Certainly, e-commerce has accelerated during the pandemic. I've seen some statistics saying that we're a decade ahead of where we expected to be in terms of growth projections of e-commerce, which again had been growing in the background all along, and in some ways more rapidly, more noticeably than teleworking. So no doubt that the pandemic has been a shot in the arm for e-commerce in general. And I wouldn't be surprised if more of that persists after the pandemic than we see for teleworking. I think it is a simpler lifestyle change to order something online once you've gotten used to doing it than to, make a extra trip to the store to buy it. On the other hand, shopping travel has never been, in my mind, a big contributor to VMT. Now, if you look at the statistics, it's something like 20% of trips are shopping trips. But, so many of those are chained to some other activity, often work. Maybe it's an errand chain that you're doing on the weekend that includes a department store as well as a bunch of other things. And so, to the extent we can keep going to stores on our way to other things or doing multiple chores or errands at a single larger commercial location, there's a lot of reasons to keep doing that. If I'm buying clothes, I might want to feel the fabric and try it on. And, if I'm buying a lot of things, I just want to see what it's like, maybe try to operate it a little bit, talk to a knowledgeable store person. And as long as I'm there, I may just buy it. Right. And so I think there are lots of reasons why stores in general are not going to disappear. Some stores in particular may in fact die, right? So it does become more difficult to sustain a bricks and mortar establishment if you're in an out of the way location, but selling things that people can buy online anyway. If you're selling niche goods, people are still probably going to want to come and look at them. But, e-commerce can be synergistic with bricks and mortar as well. You can market your products, your goods to a far greater audience than you would otherwise have for a local store. So again, very mixed bag, lots of mixed impacts. I don't see it, reducing congestion whatsoever. As you say, delivery trips will increase.
Do you think there will be any substitution effect with that free time? Any new trips that we will be making with that free time that we will have now that we are not using it to go to the supermarket?
I think one reason people do e-shopping is to save time. I can certainly identify it with that motive. But what did they do with the time? That doesn't mean they're going to run out and make more trips, because again, if they're out making more trips, they can probably stop by the store pretty, cost effectively on their way to or from something else. My guess is that time they save, they're wanting to spend with the kids at home or, on themselves at home, relaxing at home, or getting a bit more work done and being less stressed over having to also do the grocery shopping for, an hour and a half or whatever. So, I don't see the time savings from shopping, again, being a big contributor to more travel. I just don't.
Yeah, the last topic I wanna touch base regarding COVID is the impact on leisure travel. And do you think that, what's your view on, do you think that people will be avoiding what I call the crowded modes, like aeroplanes, like buses or trains that, they are not that popular in the US environment? What do you think? Do you think people will be moving or making more car-related, more road trips, more car-related trips than using any of these other modes?
I believe that once people feel safe, that means enough of the population vaccinated, new cases are down at negligible levels, and so forth. I think the long distance travel in collective modes is going to rebound substantially. People love going to other places, exotic places, and there's only so many places you can drive to in your car. You can't get to Spain in your car. You can't get to Asia in your car. And so, there's a lot of pent up demand, I believe, that people have deferred, they've canceled vacations, they've, put a lot of things off, that I think there's going to be, the spring back effect, if you will, once people feel that it's safe to travel. So, buses and trains, as you say, much harder sell in the US. If we're talking about daily commuting, it might be a longer time for that to come back. Again, transit was in decline in the US before the pandemic, so we shouldn't be too surprised if it doesn't come back right away or ever to its previous levels. And another factor is that a lot of people have bought cars during the pandemic year. And once they've bought a car, they bought a car perhaps because they didn't want to take transit in a pandemic. And you can understand that perhaps. And once they've bought a car, they use a car. And so it may be even harder to get them back on a transit vehicle, even for regular commuting, once they've bought a car, and especially perhaps if they've moved to the suburbs to a lower density location that's not well served by transit. So we have potentially those kinds of effects. But in terms of long distance travel, I'm an optimist. I think people want to see the world. I think they want to travel, and you're just going to need an airplane to do what you want to do.
You gave me the perfect introduction for my next topic. I think we've already had enough of COVID-19. We all have had enough of COVID-19. So let's move to the next big hot change that I think, or big change that will occur in mobility, that will be brought by connected and autonomous vehicles. As a company, we've always been more interested more than in the technology itself. Let's say, will the cars be ready? How will these autonomous cars will work? That is relevant, but for us as being an infrastructure provider, what is really important is how these new vehicles, how connected and autonomous vehicles will affect the user's behavior. So will they make more trips? Will they make less trips? Why? Will it longer? Will it be because of convenience, because of cost? I don't know. I see that in your research that you've done also things related to connected and autonomous vehicles, and I wanted to pick your brain and to know your opinion on this topic.
My view is that if the cost of travel remains similar to what it is now, we'll absolutely see more trips with automated vehicles. Now, it may not always be the people making those trips, right? If you can really send your empty car to pick up the dry cleaning for you, maybe you'll do that. My colleague says, why should I pay $800 a year for parking on campus if I can have my automated vehicle bring me to school in the morning, go back home, and pick me up again in the afternoon? Well, suddenly you've got 4 commute trips instead of 2. So again, if costs remain similar to what they are now, people are going to travel more for all those kinds of reasons. I mean, a big reason that I'm interested in is an automated vehicle suddenly lowers the cost of travel time, if you will, the disutility of travel time. Not all the way to zero, because there's still a lot of things that we want to do that we can't do in a moving vehicle, but we can suddenly do a lot more things in a moving vehicle if we don't have to worry about driving it. And so maybe I will, on a weeknight, go to a restaurant that's 50 or 75 miles away, because I can watch TV on the way there, and or work on the way there, watch TV on the way back, or do all kinds of things with that time and not consider it, an imposition on a weeknight's leisure time, if you will. So I absolutely think travel will increase unless it either, contributes so much to congestion that gridlock does in fact, make trips so long that people don't want to take them, even if they can do other things during the trip, or if regulation prices it, out of reach.
Okay, you've touched based on the ownership model, on the fleets. What do you think it's going to be the future as I said, ownership model? Is it going to be dominated by fleets? It's people going to jump into these massive fleets of Ubers, or there will still be private vehicles, and private ownership of autonomous vehicles? What's your view on that?
I think that unless it's regulated, unless private ownership is, again, sort of made too expensive to sustain by a typical middle class person, people are going to want to own one. I mean, we have not shown a noted desire to share rides in this country. I mean, even the Uber, shared ride versions struggle. And so, people are going to want something in their driveway that they can jump into and go anywhere at any time. Having said that, it may certainly make it possible to own one vehicle in a household instead of two, or reduce the number of vehicles owned by one or two compared to what it would be, and use, summon an Uber AV or whatever, shared or not, right? Again, I may still want to summon an AV that I don't have to share with someone else at the time. So they're sharing synchronously and they're sharing sequentially, if you will. And so people are more willing to share sequentially, i.e. use a shared vehicle if they're not sharing at that moment. So I think we'll still want to own them unless, again, ownership is priced out of reach.
Yeah, so you also talk about gridlock. So, and it's, I've been reading things and not being an expert in the area, but I'm quite hesitant to accept the view that there will be capacity increases from day one, from the first autonomous vehicles. There will be a very long period where autonomous and conventional vehicles will coexist. And so, what's your view on that? What do you think will be the impact on roadway capacity during this period of mixed autonomous and non-autonomous vehicles?
I'll preface my answer by saying that I am not a traffic flow person or a traffic engineer, so my colleagues will have studied this more than I have. But what I can say is that certainly with mixed traffic, mixed AVs and conventional vehicles, I agree. It's not clear that we will have those freer flowing benefits that are touted. Again, my traffic engineering colleague points to an issue of, if I'm in a conventional vehicle and I see an AV in the lane beside me, I can pull up and, jump in front of that AV on the assumption that it will be able to stop in a much quicker time than a live driver would. And so I may, the AVs may have trouble kind of merging or weaving because they're just never given the opening because people are always assuming that they won't need, that they'll react in time. I think that's certainly possible. I do think as more AVs permeate the fleet, we'll have, the idea, the goal, the ideal is that we'll have free flow because of platooning, right? That AVs can follow each other at much closer intervals. They're in communication. They can predict what others will do and so forth. And I think that is true, should be expectable from AVs. My question is, how long will it take for that to be outweighed by the increase in traffic that I would expect based on the ideas that I was saying a minute ago, that, there'll be more trips, there'll be greater demand, there'll be longer trips. So, if we only had today's traffic and you could, platoon vehicles at much higher speeds, then yeah, sure, traffic would flow much more smoothly and it would be better. But if you start doubling or tripling the demand for travel because of those other factors, then you're counteracting the benefits that AVs can provide kind of on a per vehicle or, in isolation. So
you also mentioned another very important element regarding AVs, which is regulation. And I want to focus on safety regulation. So how how do you see? I mean, I want to hear your opinion on. Do you see plausible a scenario where the vehicles, there will be like a layer of control or of orchestration from the infrastructure in order for all these vehicles, or autonomous vehicles, to be able to, to circulate in a controlled environment in a safe way? What do you think about that?
Again, not totally an area in which I'm expert, but my sense is that initial deployment of AVs in many cases might be on dedicated lanes. I can certainly see that for trucks, automated trucks. I can see deployment on kind of controlled routes. Closed loops or, fairly circumscribed loops with limited, flow, mixture of traffic from incoming or outgoing. So it makes sense to me that there are certainly going to be niche applications of AVs that will be the early adopters because you can control the environment a lot better. So, and I think as then the technology matures and demand grows and so forth, that'll be kind of the natural starting point from which the fleet will grow. With respect to safety, there's a lot of research, and again, I'm not into the details on a daily basis, but a lot of thinking is going into the ethics of the algorithms that go into an automated vehicle. How does it choose between, sending the AV with an occupant, maybe multiple occupants, into oncoming traffic in order to avoid pedestrians, maybe children, maybe elderly people that are blocking its path. Right. So how are those choices made? Who makes those choices? And I don't know the answers. I think those are, again, still under discussion. One question, for example, is can the owner of the AV choose the algorithm? Right. So you might have different algorithms available. This one privileges pedestrians. This other one privileges the occupants of the vehicle. Do I get to choose, to save myself and never mind those poor pesky pedestrians? Those kinds of questions are really, deep and need to be discussed at a societal level before we go too far with automated vehicles.
I wanted to finish with a broader, more general question. Is there any other big thing affecting mobility in the near future that we've missed and that you may think of? Patricia.
I think we've touched on a lot of great subjects, and really the one thing that springs to mind are drones. Again, not something that I study extensively myself, but drones do have a role in certainly e-commerce. I'm really excited about their potential for delivery of medicines and other needed, daily goods to remote areas. I think that has a lot of potential, and they also have potential for infrastructure management. Drones can fly under the bridge and get a close-up of the rivets and the rust and, all kinds of things that are difficult for humans to do, especially without, closing off the lanes and blocking traffic.
So we've reached the end of our conversation. Thank you very much, Patricia.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for asking me. I enjoyed it as well.